On to our final public hearing for the night, which is item number 11, a public hearing for rezoning zoning code text amendment for citywide lodging hotel or motel land use. Again, this is not an ex parte disclosure, and Amy Nicholson is staff.
Thank you again. The item is an office commercial zoning code text amendment. The project includes an amendment to land use table 2.6 of chapter 2023 of the zoning code. So that's the chapter on commercial land uses. This amendment would allow for the lodging, hotel, or motel land use within the office commercial zoning district upon approval of a minor use permit. This map was created based on GIS data, and so the pink areas are showing parcels that have the office commercial zoning designation at this time. From this graphic, you can see that many of the pink areas are clustered. They're generally located along some of the major regional or arterial streets within the city, and some located along Highway 101. The history on this proposal is fairly short. City staff and an applicant team had a pre-application meeting to discuss a proposal for a hotel on Airway Drive back in April. And an application for a zoning code text amendment was submitted to the department in May of this year. This shows the general plan land use diagram. So each color depicts a different land use. The diagram shows that there are a number of land uses and they're sort of scattered throughout the city, although there are some general patterns in that there is more intense development envisioned along the highway and the regional and arterial streets. I'm going to go through and just show a few zoomed in images that show parcels that would be affected by this zoning code text amendment should it be approved. And we can look at the land uses that are adjacent and abutting. This is so this light pink color is for office, and the office commercial zoning district implements the office land use designation. So the pink parcel, which is directly above the orange and the red and touching the light yellow, was the site that was discussed at the pre-application meeting for a potential hotel. So the red is the retail and business service designation, orange is for medium density residential, and yellow is for low density residential. And that thicker black line is Highway 101. So this is kind of the general pattern for a lot of the office designated parcels throughout the city. Many of them are surrounded by or at least touching some of the more intense land uses. Some of them also share a side with some lower density residential uses, and they're primarily located along the highways and regional streets. This is another portion of the city that contains quite a bit of office land use, surrounded by retail and business services, medium density and low density residential, and public institutional. The same pattern holds mostly for this area within downtown Santa Rosa. And these images show two locations in the Bennett Valley area. So along Yalupa Avenue, there's a pink cluster, which is in between retail and business services and medium density residential. And again, on Bethards and Yalupa, retail and business services, medium density, and a little bit of low density residential shown there as well. Staff has found that the proposal does does implement a number of the general plan's policies and goals, and is consistent with some of the language, the narrative that exists within both the land use element and the economic vitality element. Namely that the proposal would help to maintain the economic vitality of business parks and office areas, and one of the policies does encourage retail and business services, although limited, to be located within office areas, and does list examples including restaurants and other service type places. The economic vitality element does include policies related to retaining or expanding existing businesses within the city, focusing attraction efforts on filling vacancies in commercial structures within the city, and again maintaining the economic vitality of a variety of areas. There's one policy that directly speaks to hotels within the city, and it is to pursue an expansion of the number of hotel rooms and conference facilities to attract more meetings. So the zoning code, as you know, speaks to allowed land uses in each of the zoning districts, in addition to required development standards, so height, setback, parking requirements. The office commercial zoning district is described in the zoning code as areas that are appropriate for a variety of office uses, in addition to similar and related compatible uses. So this table it's just a portion of land use table 2.6. It lists some of the land uses that are permitted or not permitted within all of the commercial zoning districts. And so the change for this, or the change that the zoning code text amendment would implement would be that lodging could be allowed in this office commercial district upon approval of a minor use permit. I want to talk just a little bit about what a use permit entails. There's both a minor and a major use permit. The distinction is that a major use permit requires a public hearing. The review authority is the Planning Commission, and the appeal body is the City Council. A minor conditional use permit goes to the zoning administrator. It is noticed as a public meeting, so less extensively, and the appeal body is the Planning Commission. Both conditional use permits encourage a public process. That they both include the process for reviewing if a particular land use activity is appropriate at a given site, and they're both required to make the same findings for approval. The ones that can speak to this proposal mostly are that the proposed land use is, and the proposed land use and its design, its operating characteristics, its location are compatible with the existing land uses, and also that the site is physically suitable for the intensity of the proposed use. The project has been reviewed in compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act, and the zoning code text amendment has been determined to meet the criteria of CEQA guidelines sections 15183, which pertains to projects that are consistent with a general plan, community plan, or zoning. In this case, it would be consistent with the general plan, and that it does rely on the general plan environmental impact report. So the environmental impact report, which the city certified for the general plan, addressed the topical areas that are required by the CEQA guidelines. Staff did look sort of at how that environmental impact report treated office uses versus commercial uses, and looked at the air quality, traffic, and noise impacts. Many of them were fairly broad in an overview. So staff did look more into potential trip generation from a new land use within the commercial office zoning district, or office commercial, excuse me. So the trip generation showed that there would be substantially fewer AM and PM peak hours, or peak fewer trips per AM and PM peak hour for both lodging uses when compared with office uses. So those figures are listed in your staff report, but I can say one. So, for example, a hotel use, if we're talking about the same size building, and this building would include 101 hotel rooms, that office use would generate 54 AM peak trips and 61 PM peak hour trips. And a general office land use would produce 67 AM and 74 PM. Medical office uses actually generate quite a few more trips. So for comparison, a medical office use produces 120 AM trips and 179 PM peak hour trips, just for some comparison there. Impacts to noise were reviewed based on the general plan projected kind of noise contours if all the land uses were to be implemented. And so the areas that show higher sound levels are located primarily along the highway and the major streets within the city, where these parcels fall pretty neatly into. In addition, a site-specific proposal would need to demonstrate compliance with the city's general plan standards and also the city's noise ordinance, which treats office and commercial land uses the same in terms of an acceptable sound range. A number of public comments were received on this item. Several of them were kind of general inquiries trying to understand what sites were affected and what the project really was. There were a number of comments from residents, primarily from Bennett Valley. The concerns were related to noise, traffic, and safety impacts from a hotel being constructed within a residential area. And then there were just a few comments that were received in support to broaden allowable land uses within the city. Staff has no issues with this proposal. And so the Planning and Economic Development Department is recommending that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of the zoning code text amendment. Thanks.
Any questions of staff right now? Yeah, Commissioner Duggan.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to have an extensive public hearing. So why the determination for minor use permit and not just a regular conditional use permit? And what are the notifying differences to the neighborhood, let's say, for a specific project application?
So the trip generation, I may have misspoke. We used the transportation engineer's manual to look at the trips that are generated for each land use to determine, to look at how that might compare with the land uses that are already permitted. That type of analysis, like a traffic report or a study, is almost always required for any new type of development or a change in use that's reviewed by the city's traffic engineer. So that would be required for minor or a major use permit.
But why the requirement for a minor use permit instead of a major use permit?
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah, sorry.
So just in looking at how the land uses that are allowed in we looked at how it was treated in terms of, I might go back to that table, but so it's not allowed in the neighborhood commercial zoning district. It's permitted in our more intense areas, or downtown, the transit village mixed. So it's permitted by right, no use permit requirement. The minor use permit requirement falls under general commercial, and we felt that was a comparable level of analysis based on the code's requirement in general commercial.
What are the notification differences as far as if you've got a specific project and notifying the neighbors? Mm-hmm. Is there a blue sign posted, and do they have the same level of notification for either type of use permit?
No, so that is a significant distinction. So a minor use permit goes to the zoning administrator, which by default is considered a public meeting. It's still, the notice is mailed to the same 400-foot radius, but there is not the requirement for an on-site sign or a publishing in the Press Democrat. However, the notice that goes out for the public meeting does indicate that a public hearing can be requested up to the day before the meeting. It doesn't cost the person requesting it any money. It's on the applicant to pay the fees to then comply with the public hearing noticing requirements.
Commissioner Crocker?
Thanks. And maybe this will warrant further discussion, but I'm feeling that moving from not allowed at all to moving to a minor use permit, which is kind of like a ministerial stamp, in a way without review by our board, and you've got neighbors here that are looking at residential areas where they would like some ability to weigh in and control the uses adjacent to them. I might want to consider more or get further thought from you as to why you would have ruled out a conditional use permit and if that's your answer that you already gave, I'm looking for a little bit more than that, because I feel with the correspondence that we've gotten, I think this is a good question raised. I have other concerns, but if that was it, that's fine, but I might like to know more, or think that it would have made some sense to at least give us a conditional use permit to give some protection to those neighbors noticing, as Commissioner Duggan points out, in a hearing.
I don't think staff has ruled out the option of a major use permit, but this is an applicant-driven application. This is initiated by the City Council. This is here before you because an individual has paid for this application and this consideration, but is considering it on a citywide scale. But in reviewing the options, different, to whether we would staff would support this, to allow it in a district that's new. We're clear that we think it's supportive of general plan policies. But then in evaluating what type of permit process, we're in an era here looking at erring on permissiveness with caution and notification. And so that is where with the proposal being a minor use permit, staff supports the proposal, but don't have to rule out the other options. That's another option for consideration. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
We're
but it leads to another
minor
one.
Use permit. The staff is supporting the minor use permit as proposed.
Okay.
We didn't rule out another option, but we're reacting to the proposal that was before us.
Okay. So it's because it's applicant driven and they want a minor use permit, obviously, not a major use permit.
Well, staff considered it and supports it because, like I said, the other general plan policies and, frankly, the process improvements that are moving forward with the city is to look at how to streamline applications and yet cover notification and I say caution, but really it's that use permit test in terms of review, in terms of fit and compatibility. And so looking at, I'll broaden that. So we look throughout the general plan, where would this land? It's not just the applicant's site, it's looking broader. So how would this play out? And in most cases, as City Planner Nicholson has said, is that in most cases, the location is adjacent or abutting retail business service or other intense designations. So in most cases, that makes sense to us, minor use permit. It may be that in some of these smaller, there are exceptions to that, and there's smaller parcels or abutting residential where that's going to get a lot more difficult in terms of, or challenging in terms of making all those use permit findings if it's a real intense hotel development. And just by allowing it doesn't mean that will happen to those districts, but it does give consideration. And there's a lot of different ways that you can look at this as one parcel, but in this case, we're looking at it citywide. What if we allowed this consideration in this district? And there's not a lot of uses in this district allowed. When you look at the land use tables, this is one of the most restrictive zoning districts in the city. There's really not another one that's probably this tight. And so we're looking at is this an acceptable district to even consider hotels? Right now, we can't consider hotels in this district. And one of the slides showed north part of Santa Rosa, both sides of the highway. Those are all commercial office. And why not open that to consideration of hotels? And there's others in downtown, on the edge of downtown. Why not consider? So that's where staff came to be open about the suggestion, and we didn't spend a whole lot of time, and we didn't rule out conditional use permit as a higher level review process, but we accepted the minor use permit.
Okay.
But that's why it's before you, is for your consideration,
Yeah.
to exercise your thoughts about this from your own perspectives.
Sure. And if others want to discuss, that's fine. I have 3 or 4 other questions. I don't know how you want.
I just want to clarify something. It sounds like, Ms. Nicholson, you said that any member of the public can make the request that it bump up to a public hearing of that level. Isn't it also true that the director can look at any minor use permit and bring it up to the level of the commission if it looks like it's going to be somewhat controversial? You might want to explain that.
Yes, that is correct. So it is at the department's discretion to elevate any permit to the appropriate review authority should it seem appropriate or particularly controversial. And there are some recent examples of when we have done that. In regard to the request for a public hearing from a public meeting notice, those do happen fairly regularly. I think because it's explicitly in the notice and because there isn't a fee, I think that's a big component, not stopping someone who might not be able to pay for the fee.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have other questions, Commissioner Cropper?
Yeah. Thanks. I would like then to talk about the findings that we need to make regarding consistency with the goals and policies of all elements of the general plan. And you refer back to page 4 of the staff report. And I'm just not completely following the consistency with the general plan. So you say the general plan describes office land use as a designation that provides administrative, financial, business, professional, medical, and public offices. Then you say staff finds that hotels and motels, which are not listed there, are nonetheless consistent with the general plan because they are what you call a supportive use. Can you provide some more of that? What is a supportive use? I didn't go to look if there's a definition for that. What is that, and how is a hotel a supportive use for an administrative, financial, business, professional, medical, and public office?
The one sentence, I guess the general plan gives some discussion to what all the different land uses, what they mean or how they are envisioned. And the office land uses, it is just that one sentence. It's very brief. Most of the other designations provide, 4 or 5 sentences about all the types of uses that may or that should be there or that are encouraged. Staff looked at the policies that fell under what the land use section called commercial, office, and industrial, and so that's where these general plan policies are pulled from in the land use section. The supportive land use, that isn't defined in the zoning code. Staff was looking at that as it's not necessarily, it's not the primary land use. Obviously, the office designation is intended for office uses, but there is a potential synergy or connection between a lodging land use and someone who's visiting a doctor for a consultation, or someone who is from out of the area, someone who might be meeting other business associates for a meeting, probably office or hotels that might be less, could be less tourist driven, maybe not, but it would also activate some sort of, or it would encourage a pedestrian environment or more activity within the office areas of the city. So that's how staff reached that determination.
And one more follow-up with that.
Okay.
On that same page, we highlight general plan policy LULJ3, allow limited support retail and business services such as cafes, delis, and dry cleaners, where the land use classification on the general plan diagram is office or business park. And the whole intent of that is kind of where we're getting at. Is right now it's zoned, it's so it does allow for some of those items, but that's it's expressed here that we want to have support uses such as this, and hotels can fall. They're maybe a little bit more intense if you're imagining a larger scale, but they don't necessarily are all on that scale. So, but that hotels could support an office community, and you go to other communities, and there's often accommodations associated with an office park or within a business park, and that's to accommodate conferences and meetings. And so hotels are not all the same, and so they may not fit downtown and be an office supporting type of hotel. They may be better located in the actual office area. And so that's part of the support statement that where staff came from it.
All right, I appreciate that, but I'm thinking that cafes, delis, and dry cleaners, I can get that those are supportive of financial, business, professional, and medical. And you were talking about that there's a synergy. Like I don't mean to belabor well, maybe I do, the point. But if this also is the premise of your CEQA determination, so I think it's a critical. Not only do I have to make the finding that this is consistent with the general plan, but then the 15183 that you're relying on expressly says that I have to be consistent with the general plan and the EIR. So and I'll defer off to others to continue to this if they want to, but I'm feeling like this is a bit of a stretch to me to say that a hotel with, you had given an example of 101 units, is somehow a supportive use akin to a cafe, a deli, or a dry cleaner. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. Any other questions before we go into discussion? Any other questions? Commissioner Edmondson.
About the sort of compatibility between residential areas and this land use, this zoning. It's approved, or it can be approved with a minor use permit in the general commercial zone. Is that correct?
Yes.
So would you find, looking at the city as a whole, like we've done for the purposes of this report, would you find that the general commercial abuts residential uses out in the city with some frequency?
Yes, and that was one. So just in going through these pictures, that one's not a great example. This graphic here shows quite a bit of general or retail business services directly abutting low-density residential on the east side of Highway 101. That's certainly the case in the downtown area. Also in the Bennett Valley neighborhoods, there's large areas of general commercial right across from the office land use designation.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so, okay, go for it. Might as well.
So quiet up here. Can you explain more? I mean, this is a strange position. I mean, I'm all for hotels, and I actually think that the original proposal of, where they wanted to put that hotel would make some sense. And then that application, they would have had to do a rezone and a general plan amendment, right? So why did the city take on this citywide zoning? It seems to me it's perfectly logical for them to come in with a rezone and a general plan amendment for the hotel that they want, and we could review that, rather than this citywide that, as you know, I mean, it seems to make sense in a lot of these areas, but I'm thinking of these residents, in particular Bennett Valley, that are not too keen on this, and I'm not sure why you deviated from the applicant's hotel, which I think sounds like it makes sense. Why are we doing citywide?
Do you want to? I mean, I can talk to you.
So We did speak with the applicant about the option of just focusing on the one site. And yes, you're correct. It's a general plan amendment and a rezoning to retail business service and to general commercial, and then they would apply for a minor use permit. But as we were talking with them and learning about the climate of the hotel community, hotel industry, and looking at and understanding all the variations and the needs across the hotel spectrum, and looking at all these other similarly designated office sites, it became apparent that maybe the issue of allowing for hotels, there is an opportunity on multiple sites, and that is that. So it was worthy of a citywide text amendment discussion as opposed to just a single site. But the idea of just doing site by site, that was offered. They have applied for a citywide text amendment, so we're responding to that.
Okay, but I mean, essentially then we're removing the need for them to process their own general plan and rezone. We're just going to rezone it for them, so that instead of them having to do those major entitlements, we're going to say, okay, you can come in for a minor use permit, kind of over the counter, no hearing. That's the effect of us taking this on for them, right?
But they're the impetus for the application and putting it out there, and they're not here to speak for themselves. So I don't want to be in a position to speak for them. We're responding to their application. We're asked to consider it as a citywide text amendment, and so that's what we're here to do.
Okay, I think I'm the only one that has anything to say on this. Thank you for your responses.
Oh, I don't think you're the only one who has anything to say.
Oh,
but
okay. I'm sorry the
we hadn't
applicant's
got to
not
the
here.
discussion part yet.
Yeah,
Oh, gosh, I forgot.
yeah, we still need to do a public hearing.
Let's discuss.
We could do this as a general discussion.
Well, not yet. We have to do the public hearing first. Okay, so we don't have an applicant that's going to be doing any presentation. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing, and not seeing anyone rise, I'm going to close the public hearing, and now we can bring it back to the commission for discussion if somebody would like to move a resolution.
I'll make a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa recommending to the City Council approval of zoning code amendment to Land Use Table 2-6 of Section 20-23.030 Commercial District Land Uses and Permit Requirements, file number REZ16-001. Way further reading of the text.
I'll second.
Okay, so that was moved by Vice Chair Stanley, seconded by Commissioner Duggan. How about if you say something, Vice Chair Stanley?
Okay, I do have something to say about this.
Okay, good.
So what Commissioner Crocker's saying is, I agree partially with what she's saying. I look at all of these land use designations that we have on there, and there are some that seem problematic. The ones that abut residential districts. I have no problem with the city being proactive in rezoning appropriate land use designations. I am against the idea that we just do this one-off, one by one by one by one through the city. Having said that, it seems to me that there ought to be, when the land use abuts a residential district like we're seeing on some of these examples here, that it probably deserves maybe just a little higher level of scrutiny. And whether that scrutiny can occur at a minor use permit level or whether it needs to be elevated to the Planning Commission, it literally does just take somebody going through the process of making an appeal, and then it ends up in front of us. But I look on this map and I see, and you drive around the city and you look at these locations, and it is appropriate. I'm not sure that are they supporting? Well, in some instances, hotels and motels are supporting for even residential districts where you have small-scale hotels, motels that support the residential areas, they support the commercial areas. I don't think it's a stretch necessarily to say that this is an opportunity to put these in. I do have an issue with the ones that abut residential because the noise issues associated with that aren't from the residential to the hotel. It's what happens when you go from a use that's an 8 to 5 use and you go to a use that, as hotels can be, 24-hour use. So that might need more scrutiny. I'd be willing to consider that as when these projects abut residential districts, but I'm not finding as much problem with it as Commissioner Crocker has. And again, I'll reiterate, I don't have a problem with the city being proactive about things like this. It's expensive enough to do things in this community and in this state, so I don't have a problem with sort of taking a broader look and saying, let's find an avenue to making this simpler. It's very expensive to get in front of us. So.
Okay, I have a logistical question for the city attorney and staff. Is there a way to modify this resolution to specify the higher level of scrutiny and if it's abutting residential, or is it just going to be more global than that? You know, we have our zoning code table, so just considering that Vice Chair Stanley may want to make a motion for a friendly amendment to be discussed, but how would that happen?
I don't think not the footnote area.
In terms of whether you can amend the resolution to require a conditional use permit rather than a minor use permit, would be permissible. You may do that.
But across the board, or it's just specific to office commercial abutting residential?
You could do it either way, but the way the charts work.
That works. We do that for other uses. So, for example, in an industrial park, many uses are permitted by right, but there's a footnote that says if you abut a residential use, your operations or your suite abut a residential use, then you shall require a minor use permit. So we do it for other uses where that proximity to residential matters, and it's elevated not at the discretion of the director, but it's clear to everyone what that process is. So that's another option that you could do.
Okay, so it'd be handled by a footnote on the. Okay, so is that something you would like to propose, Vice Chair Stanley, as a friendly amendment, or do you want it to go more to a motion?
I don't want to propose it. I'm waiting to hear what the rest of the commission and the discussion has to say.
But we could do
this.
it if we wanted to. Okay. Commissioner Edmondson.
Thank you. I know this might be a difficult question to answer, but can we estimate what slice of these zoned parcels do abut residential areas as a share of the land that we're looking at? Yeah, I realize that's probably going to take a lot more analysis than a few seconds, so I understand that. Okay. I think that I don't necessarily understand the justification for treating the office commercial differently than the general commercial when it comes to parcels that abut or projects that would abut residential areas. I do understand the obvious need to consider the interests of residential neighborhoods and neighbors in those contexts, but that might be a bigger discussion and to be done globally and not just necessarily single out the office commercial zoning. I think Commissioner Crocker raised a really interesting argument about what is the limiting principle when we are saying that the general plan supports this use because it's a limited support retail and business service, and making a kind of a critique of the analogy to a restaurant or a dry cleaner. I do understand that and agree that it's a difficult analogy to draw. It seems to me like the only limiting principle is that this is a commercial use in some way. Otherwise, you could say that housing is supportive of offices because people need to live somewhere, and maybe the employees would be right next to the office. And if it's all just about supporting offices, you could conceivably draw a connection to almost any land use. But I think the fact that it's a commercial use is good enough for me to see the limiting principle in that. So I would support this amendment.
Okay. Commissioner Duggan?
I actually would support the one with the footnote asking for a major use permit when it's adjacent to residential, because I think if we don't require a blue sign for a minor use permit, there are going to be lots of residential areas where people live right beyond the notification distance when they won't get a letter, and they won't necessarily know that a proposed hotel is going to go in on that site unless there's a blue sign. So I'd rather have them have a public hearing where they can come and make their views known. And it kind of concerns me that we've only gotten these letters so far from people in Bennett Valley because they heard about this proposed text amendment. And I think there are probably people in other neighborhoods in the city who would feel the same way. So I would be for the zoning text change, the amendment with the major use permit when adjacent to residential. Because I also worry about unintended consequences when a private application comes forward and they are applying for something that will pertain citywide, and we haven't taken the time to maybe vet it as thoroughly as we would have if we had initiated it.
Okay, so we may have to end up doing a vote on that, but Commissioner Crocker, you want to make your statement?
Well, I'm thinking about what another commissioner had raised, though, that there's no such footnote for other, I forget who said that, right? For other commercial uses that abut. So there are other uses that are allowed by right that abut residential, and there's no footnote, or maybe staff said that.
I think it might have been what I said, just about general commercial that would abut residential, and it would be permitted with a minor use permit there.
Okay,
No footnote.
Right, no footnote. Okay.
I think Claire said about the footnotes.
Okay. Did you want to continue? Can I weigh in here? You'll get another chance when I'm done. Because we sort of have this footnote thing semi on the table, but we'll do it more formally. I think we have to trust the processes that we have in place. I think the minor use permit policy, it already opens up that door for those areas that may be controversial or that the director may see as potentially controversial to bump up to a public hearing or to bump up to the level of a major use permit. I see a footnote as potentially problematic in interpretation, like we've seen what does it mean if you abut a historic neighborhood. I mean, how specific can you get, and how well could that be interpreted, or how far out might that be interpreted? So I see the footnote as potentially problematic in terms of an interpretation. And my preference would be to just to trust our process that, again, I just don't think we're going to get flooded with applications of this type of nature. But I think our staff can take a look at those and see if it's in Bennett Valley, yeah, I better bump it up to a conditional use permit because you're going to be hearing from them. I do see this as a supportive use. I've spent times in a hotel when my parent was in the hospital. I think that there's a lot of benefit to using existing complexes and infrastructure to support, to have people that are staying nearby for meetings, for conferences, for medical appointments. So I see this as, again, more in keeping with our idea of using the present infrastructure that we have and better utilizing the ability to use our pedestrian facilities. So I'm completely in favor of it the way that it's proposed without the footnote. and trusting the process. So Vice Chair Stanley, do you want to weigh in, and we'll see if we need to take a vote on the footnote idea?
I don't know that I have any more to add other than I don't see a grand distinction between residential. I mean, I understand there's a difference between residential and a hotel, but we allow residential in the CO district. So we allow people to live there as part of a mixed-use project. Hotels can very much be mixed use in a lot of ways. Sometimes they're more horizontal mixed use with a cafe or something associated with the hotel side themselves. I don't think that they're so unique that this is a big stretch for us to say that they're supportive of, or even to some degree in alignment with the policies that we have in place. I agree with Commissioner Edmondson that the distinction between a CG and a CO, I'm having a hard time making that stretch for me that this is some grand departure. And I certainly wouldn't be supportive of making everybody go through a general plan amendment and major conditional use permit to try to get into those. So I guess I'm saying I'm not really supportive of the little note.
Can I make another comment?
Sure.
So I want to make clear that I actually think we do need a lot more hotels in this community because if we only have sort of the really low end and then some very high end ones and nothing much in between. So I would be very much in favor of that. And I think they should be located in the core. And I think that it's only problematic when we're talking about like the very end of Bennett Valley where we have a little tiny narrow strip of office commercial zoned and designated area that's surrounded by residential. And my main objection to this as it stands is the notification process, that things can go in and people won't know about it, and if they're not within the noticing distance, they're not going to know that they can request a hearing. Mm-hmm. But if there's a blue sign that spells it out like most of all the rest of our projects, then I think that's giving people much more fair notice.
Okay. So should I be asking Commissioner Duggan if she wants to make a motion so that we could weigh in on that formally?
Yes.
I need to put this to wherever it's going to go.
Right. She may make a motion, then you can vote on that and then go back to the original motion, depending on.
Or is there a way to
you can
change a minor use permit so you have to have a blue sign if it's adjacent to residential?
That would be very difficult to do. Our procedures are consistent across the board.
Yeah.
So to carve out a different procedure for a single use in a single district would be, I think, pretty unworkable just from a practical perspective. I think if the commission wants to go that direction, the footnote is a better process.
Okay, then shall I make a amendment and see how it goes? Or make a
Yeah,
motion?
you propose to amendment.
Okay.
Somebody has to second it,
Yes.
and then we'll vote on it.
Okay, I'll
I
propose
think.
an amendment that just requires
I'm
a
not too good at this.
footnote designating that whenever an application comes through and it's adjacent to residential, that it's elevated to a hearing with a conditional use permit.
Okay, do I have a second on that? Not getting a second, so then the motion fails and we go back to our original motion.
Correct.
Okay. Any other discussion on that, Commissioner Crocker? Are you looking? No? Okay. Okay, so we have our original motion made by Vice Chair Stanley, seconded by Commissioner Duggan, and your votes, please. And that passes with 5 ayes, Commissioners Gronica and Dipple being absent. And I believe that concludes our business tonight. And we will adjourn to our October meeting.